with the Tax Goddess and Tax Goddess Live. Our podcast exists to educate, to entertain, and to inspire entrepreneurs and business owners and all the crazy, passionate, self-employed people out there. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Today is Tuesday, July 31st. And I, Shauna, your tax goddess, is joining you from sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, I'm super, super excited. So as you can see, our guest here, I'm so excited for you guys. If this is not entertaining, you need to just drop our podcast right now, because I can already tell you this is going to be a fantastic podcast. So, Mr. Nick Klein, are you ready to do this?
Yes, ma'am.
So Nick is an expert in backyard farming and urban livestock, and I'm super excited to have him here with us today. Nick, what is one of the most important things that our audience is going to get out of today's broadcast?
Well, first off, being crazy doesn't make you wrong. I want everybody to know that right now. So if you're the last person in the room that knows what's right and everybody around you is thinking that you're crazy, you just need to stick with it, because chances are you're right. Unless the voices are telling you to kill, you're probably not crazy.
Bypass that one, yeah.
But yeah, that's what's kept me going anyways, is, a lot of people think it's crazy what I do. I'm on about 1/8 of an acre in the middle of the Phoenix Valley, and I can grow around 50,000 pounds of food annually out of my backyard.
50,000 pounds. And how many people? So convert that into English for us non-farmers. How many people does 50,000 pounds of food feed?
It depends. So the average American, middle age, is going to consume around 1,200 pounds of food a year. Me being slightly larger than average, I do about 2,000 pounds a year. But it's between 1,200 and 2,000 pounds. So 25 people could live off of my backyard. And I can bring it down to a monocrop and specialize in one thing in my backyard, and then have a neighbor that specializes in another, and so on and so forth. And we could get enough food collectively to feed the entire neighborhood and be okay, just with implementing some basic farming.
And so I'm already jumping way ahead into some of the questions, but I want to come back to the idea of mono farming here, because there's always kind of this question, as you mentioned, if I specialize in one thing and my neighbor specializes in something else, but what happens if you get into an argument with your neighbor and now they don't want to share anymore? So there's always kind of that question. What your 2-second opinion? What do you think is better, mono farming in a group or?
Well, so this is difficult, because I like being independent, but I see the need for interdependence. As an independent person, you can plant everything that you and your family needs in your backyard. You're using aquaponics and rabbits and quail and fish, and you've got all this stuff going, and that's all fine and dandy. But what happens when you break your leg? What happens when you become disabled? It's all fine and dandy to be independent, but that's just one little guy. When we'll simplify it. Why make enemies when you can have friends? In the words of Boyd Craven, I believe it was. But it's not there isn't any argument that should stop somebody from being fed. You got to just come to terms. You got to be an adult. You got to talk things out. But yeah, that's the way I see it. Or you find new partners. There's 5 million people in the Phoenix Valley. I'm sure there are other people that would like to help you. If you got to drive 5 miles, that's fine.
And of course, my brain, being the accountant in my mind, right? 5 million times 50,000 pounds is how much food for how many people? I love it.
We could easily turn Arizona, the Phoenix Valley, if 20% of the population got on board with urban farming, we could feed everybody in the valley and have a surplus, even in our desert. So there's a lot of things we can do to conserve water and still farm. The Germans did it best, I think, with the Hogelkultur, which is basically you put timber in a pile and then put dirt over the pile, and then you run water through the middle of the pile. And as the timber, as the wood rots down, it adds carbon to the soil, and the plants pull it up and use it. And you're lightly fertilizing the top of it, but it's pulling lots of good stuff out of the middle of it, and it's saving a lot of water that way too, because it's not just open to evaporation; it's already under the dirt.
So. I've heard another term for that, and I know we're going way down into the weeds right off the bat, but this is the downsides to talking to an expert, right? There's just so much information we need to get across. I've heard another...
ADD. So.
Well, thank goodness we have some questions. We'll come back to it. But didn't I tell you guys, listeners, right? This one's going to be entertaining for sure. So, okay. Well, so let's jump into, the most important thing you said that the audience is going to get out of today's broadcast is the knowledge that they can farm. They can produce food for their family. They can produce food even for their neighborhood is kind of what you're talking about. One of the things that you had mentioned to me early on is that the grocery store and the restaurant isn't the only place to get food, right? So, go ahead.
Prior to 1942? Now I'm pulling that one out. It might be 39. Was the invention of household refrigeration. So you've got the refrigerator makes its debut, and then shortly thereafter, or actually right prior to that, you have the supermarket come into existence. And so now you have a common place where you can go and just buy your food, and you can store it for pretty much almost as long as you need it in your refrigerator. So people stopped canning. People stopped preserving. They stopped curing their own meats. And, America moved out of the family farm. And these people are going back into the city, and they're trying to make money in the factories and whatnot, and they're no longer responsible for where their food comes from. And so entrepreneurs step up and start buying lots of farms, and they buy a bunch of farms, they hire people to work the farms, and now we have the industrial farming situation that we're in today. And I don't blame the guy that's like, all right, I'm going to make as much food as possible for as cheap as possible. I'm going to do it this way. Let's go ahead and invent some stuff to put in the food. Let's have Roundup to kill the weeds, but we'll make the food so it's resistant to the Roundup, so we can spray the Roundup right on it. And these are all things, these are tactics to help him make more money and make more food for the people that no longer want to make the food for themselves. So because of our convenience need right there, we have handed the reins of food over to somebody else, and a lot of people are mad about how that person's handling it. And this is the opportunity to take the reins back. If you've got a backyard, you've got a food source.
And just to kind of go back to that number, an eighth of an acre. So, and again, I don't really know. That's not English to me, right? Because I don't normally deal in land.
I'm not very good at that either. So,
how many square feet of a garden? I don't know. Maybe we can figure that out. Like, how much land do you actually need? Do you need land or raised beds? Like, those are all kinds of questions that kind of jump into my mind.
Those are things you can use. You can go right up a wall if you want to. I think an acre is around 43. Let's say 44,000, and we'll times that by the 0.12. So I have 5,200 square feet, and then minus the 1,540 square foot house on it, that leaves me with 3,700 square feet. And a third of that is in my front yard. So 2,500 square feet in my backyard. And I've been able to, I have about a 2,000 gallon pond, which is 4 foot deep, 12 foot by 5 foot, 6 foot, 12 by 6, I think. Anyway, it's 2,000 gallons. It's in the corner of my yard. And from that, all the dirty water from the fish pooping and peeing in the water, I run that through filter beds that grow food. I can plant fruit and vegetables right into a soilless garden. It's known as hydroponics, but hydroponics being mixed with aquaculture gives you aquaponics. So that's what is the main...
So that's the combination of the fish plus the plants with the water.
Yes.
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's some complications there, but really, I killed tomato plants before I went with aquaponics. I mean, I'd plant them in the dirt, and I might forget to water them one day, and then they're just toast in the next, 24 hours. So I had to figure out something that was auto watering without just wasting a ton of water. And aquaponics actually uses only 3% of the water that you would use in conventional gardening and farming. So, and because there's a lot of it that gets lost to evaporation.
Well, I know for my own garden, I have a garden here, and it's a raised bed, concrete block, right? It's probably 6 feet by 15 feet, and I put a lot of water, and it's one of those biotic beds where it's got the logs underneath, right? So every year I have to put new dirt on top, but yeah, there's a lot of water lost just that way, because you're watering, and it's just seeping all the way through, not really staying with the plants themselves. So... Okay, well, clearly the dog is really happy about what we're talking about. Okay, but we've gone way, 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 way into the weeds. Let's back up a step here, right? Because one of the things that I found absolutely fascinating, and if you guys are seeing the actual video today, you can see the fantastic logo. Nick owns a company called Hostile Hair. And, Nick, I know you have a few statistics here, some things that are going to blow our listeners' minds about the food and about these options. What are some of the major statistics that you have?
Okay, well, let's start with what I started with, rabbits. One breeding female, obviously she needs a boyfriend, but one breeding female can produce up to 11 kindles per year, that's a litter, and up to 8 to 10 babies per litter, so kits per kindle. So the math ends up being 320 to 480 pounds of live rabbit per year from one female. Now, a dressed rabbit, so a ready to cook rabbit, only weighs about 3.5 pounds. So you're losing about 1.5 pounds in the entrails and in the fur. But other than that, they're very efficient. Now, right now, our main source of meat in America is cattle. Cattle are 9 times less efficient than rabbits. So for the same amount of feed that you put into a cow to get 1 pound, I can get closer to 4 to 9 pounds of rabbit. So
when you say efficient, you mean the food being converted to, the pellets being converted to meat, that conversion rate.
Exactly. And you don't necessarily have to give them pellets. I use a system of fodder. So 1 pound of seeds goes into a tray. You water it for 7 days, and every day you fill another tray up. So at the end of 7 days, you have 7 pounds of feed from 1 pound of seed. So it's about 1 pound a day. It increases, and every day you get another tray, because every day you fill up a tray, you empty a tray. So you'll have 7 trays going at a time. Does that make sense?
It does. So almost like a rotating system, right? So because then at some point the rabbits are going to eat it, right? So you fill up the next tray and replace it. So I'm already hearing, right off the bat, you started talking about convenience. And of course I'm hearing trays and rabbits and pellets and food and systems and ponds and plants, and I'm going into overwhelm, and I've known you for a long time. So where, somebody who's looking to, as you said, take back the reins and the control on their food, right? What is one of the simplest places to start? Like if you do nothing right now.
So if you're sitting there, you have a blank space. You've just got maybe a conventional landscape. I think the easiest thing for people to do is they call me up, they say, hey, I want my yard to grow food. And so the average is for every square foot of land that you're planting, you're going to grow about $10 of produce a year. So I have 3,700 square feet of open lot space. That's, let's see, 3,700, so it'd be $37,000 worth of food annually out of my open yard if I planted everything. Yeah, every square foot. So realistically, it's going to be probably 25% of your yard, or whatever your demands are, really. We can plan it any way you want to. So the easiest way is to have somebody like me come out, and look at your yard and give you the microclimates and then give you a list of things you can grow in those areas. We actually will give you a list of vegetables and fruit and say, which of these do you eat now and which would you like to grow in your yard out of this list? And you just pick those out, and then I find a spot in your yard, you can grow it. There's some wolfberries that grow really well here in Arizona, and oh my gosh, they're good. So
I don't think I've ever even had a wolfberry. Of course, it's not something I normally see in the store.
Goji berries.
Goji. Oh, the little red things. And
Yeah.
there we go. Okay, one of the superfoods. That's cool. We
Yes,
can grow them
exactly.
here. That's amazing.
And one of my friends we're trying to get some dragon's blood plants growing. It's like $100 an ounce for the sap that comes out of this tree. It's like,
Ooh.
yes, I will grow a plethora of dragon.
And that money will, of course, pay for the rest of all of the farming and all the equipment, everything else you might need. Okay, well, so that brings up another question here. One of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on today, right, is because, listeners, from a tax perspective, I'm looking at a dual opportunity here. So one, right, from a tax perspective, there are a ton of tax credits for having a farm. And, the status of a farm at the federal level is whether or not you have 6 trees that grow any kind of food. So you could be talking, like here in Arizona, we have a ton of citrus, right? And for example, my home, I have 3 orange trees, a peach tree, a lime tree, and a lemon tree, which effectively 6 makes this piece of property a farm, which means all of my equipment, all of my dirt, all of my tools, if I have to hire an expert to come out and help me on the farm, these things are all a tax deduction. So, one piece of this is controlling your food source, right? Which, as you mentioned, a lot of people are really kind of upset. We don't know what we can even eat anymore. You see articles about butter's bad for you. Nope, butter's good for you. Milk is bad for you. Milk has hormones. But, back and forth. Like, if you're not controlling your food, you don't really know what you're eating, what you're putting into your body. So,
Exactly.
this gives you the control, right? Going with your own farming gives you the control. Of course, we love a tax deduction, right? Make sure you're making income. You have to make income. So the sap, I think, is brilliant. If you can sell it for $100 an ounce, there's your income for your farm.
I think that's retail on it, but yeah.
Ooh, well, even if you went to wholesale at 50%, it's still great. $50 an ounce. It's fantastic. Okay, and then the third thing that really stands out to me is that if you don't have some sort of business in the tax world, you have no deductions. If you're a W-2 employee, you're basically stuck, especially under the new 2018 tax laws, you're basically stuck. So this is an opportunity for you to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Have this business and get everything written off, 3 birds, and control your food source. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is that, okay, so we talked a little bit about rabbits, right? We talked a little bit about the aquaponics. Now, I have a question for you on the aquaponics side. You mentioned that you have this size of a pond. The first thing that jumped into my mind was a pool, because many people have pools in their backyard. They just have one because they bought a house, has a pool, but maybe they don't use it. It's very expensive to maintain a pool. Can you convert a pool into a fish pond?
Very much so. There's actually been a couple of people here in the valley. In fact, there's a website, gardenpool.org. Throw that out there. A guy named Dennis, he moved into a house and it was going to be like 15 grand to fix up his pool. And he's like, nope. So like half the pool down is holding water fine. So he just used it. It's like 3,000 gallons, filled it up with tilapia. He's got chickens that kind of go over top of the tilapia. And he has rain gutters that a pump goes up and it runs through the rain gutters and it feeds all of his leafy greens and stuff, and it's pretty awesome. There's another guy that's over in Mesa, Lehigh area, that he has the whole swimming pool full, so somewhere around 30,000 gallons, and he's like, oh, I don't know what to do with all my fish. And I was like, well, why don't you just start a farmer's market right in the middle of Mesa? You're going to have a lot of stuff. And I go driving by there, and it's Love's Market now. He's got it.
That's so
it was pretty awesome. And he's like me, where he can't really focus on one thing at a time, and he's got tons of stuff going out there. Like he's got an acre and a quarter of property, and half of it's watermelon because he's like, oh, I just really love watermelon, just brrr, tons of it.
Well, and I know the juicing people absolutely love watermelon. It's good for so much stuff. So, yeah. Well, so earlier, one of the things, so I just jump around as much as you do because I'm fascinated by these things you talked about. You talked about growing food up a wall. What do you mean? Yes. What kind of food grows up a wall?
Well, there are vining stuff that will go up a wall, but what I'm talking about is a planter that actually goes on the wall. You can have, it's basically, how do I describe this? It's kind of a raised bed, a grow bed, with all those principles, except that you've got it attached to an otherwise useless wall other than dividing your property. So depending on where your sun is, on like where the sunrise is, whatever, you need to plant accordingly. So some plants like morning sun and no afternoon sun, some like the opposite. So if you've got a house that runs north to south, you can plant on your east and west walls and just go right up off the ground. You can actually trellis stuff like we were talking about, watermelons, cantaloupe, any of those things. You can grow right up a trellis and then just support them with like little hammock socks or whatever, so they don't rip off the vine. And they're awesome because you build this shade structure, and then the plants go right up the walls, and you're hanging your stuff, and then you can grow stuff that needs a real a darker area to grow.
You've got the land space still then underneath. Yeah. You're talking about underneath the shade structure.
Exactly.
Well, and we've seen a lot here in Arizona. You see a lot of people do that even with grapes, where they'll build a physical shade structure and have the vining of the grapes. I didn't think about that, but over the structure. So you've got grapes hanging down, and there you go.
Well, you should see what they did. They've taken apple trees and planted them right next to a wall, and then direct the branches where to go. And they've got the branches like pinned against the wall, so it makes like a wall cover over it. And it's still fruiting, still growing, and it's happy to have its own structure helping it out. And yeah, you can do some crazy stuff with food. You have to have patience to do that. I'm a little bit more of the grow fast guy.
And those rabbits.
Right, and speaking of fast, we've got rabbits out there, but no, I like even some of the plants I grow. I have moringa, which is one of the superfoods as well. I planted it. I bought a year-old moringa plant that wasn't doing very well. It was in a pot, and the guy says, "Well, it's not going to do very well because it's got a taproot." I was like, "Well, yeah." So we put it out here in my yard, and it sends the taproot down. It's 13 feet tall now. That was last year in August. So it just super fast.
Happy plant.
Oh yeah, very happy. I feed it a little bit of rabbit manure and keep it kind of watered. You don't want to water them too much because you want them to send the root down. But yeah, and I'll have to share a picture with you. The bean pods that are on it are like a foot long and covering the whole plant. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, and moringa, you talk about the superfood. I've heard you can use the bark for antiseptic and the leaves. So I actually have one here myself. It's not quite 13 feet tall. It's getting there. But it almost tastes like a cross between kale and spinach with like a lemon drizzle on it to me. Like it actually tastes, pretty good. So,
have you tried the flowers?
No, I haven't seen any flowers yet. They're spicy. Ooh.
Yeah, they're just a little bit of a spice to them, and I'll walk out my door every morning and grab something off it and eat it, and hope that it wasn't a bug.
Well, and that could take us down a whole nother path. I don't want to get way too far off the thing, but for anybody out there who does, if you do live here in Arizona, and no matter where you live, I would suggest considering taking a course or a class on what you can eat that is local. Because, especially here, there's trees called Palo Verde, and they have these beautiful yellow flowers at certain times of the year. You can eat the flowers. And a lot of people don't realize that, right? They see the orange trees and they're like, oh, that's an orange, except it's an ornamental orange and it tastes disgusting because terrible. But there are these options of what you can eat. Okay. Okay. So we've been all over the board here. Let's get back to rabbits because, there are very clearly so many options on things you can do out and about, and, you can go with the aquaponics. And I want to let you go wherever you want to go with this, but I know Hostile Hair is kind of all about the rabbits, right? So if somebody... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. Well, yes, we're all about rabbits. That's just the starting point. Once you're ready to go past the edible landscaping and get into livestock, now you would start with rabbits. Rabbits are easy. I had 1,600 of them, and they were 20 minutes, 30 minutes a night taking care of them because I had the proper setup. I had the equipment to take care of them. Spray the cages out, feed them, water them. You're good to go. Saturdays were breeding day. That would take a couple hours to get everybody bred if it was, if everybody needed to be done. But if sections, I had 4 cage batteries that were 32 moms apiece. I had 128 breeding females, 16 males, and was producing around 700 babies a month. And yeah, my feed was ridiculous. 1,600 rabbits on hand at any time, each one consuming 4 ounces of feed a day. It's 400 pounds a day. So.
And that was all you, just one person?
Mm-hmm. It was on my former in-law's property, and my ex-father-in-law was like, "Oh yeah, I'll feed the rabbits for you tonight." I was like, "Okay." He comes out of there. He's like, "This can't be legal. There's so many rabbits."
Well, okay, you bring up a good point. I mean, are there legal restrictions that if you're going to look at something like this, whether it's livestock or farming or anything like that? And I know we're here in Arizona, so this would only be Arizona law, I presume. But do you know of any legal restrictions or things that people should check into?
I think that the laws have changed recently, but it was 10 rabbits per quarter acre.
Per quarter acre, okay.
But if you say they're pets, that's a different law. Like if you're raising livestock for sale, then you need to have an agricultural setup. Like it has to be a farm at that point. And where we were was actually it was residential on farming, so that it was zoned residential farming, and it wasn't illegal. It was just anyway, we won't get into that, but.
So definitely check with your local laws and confirm the difference between. Yeah.
Those guys with guns that enforce that.
Yes, we do not want that. Okay. But confirm the difference between, because I heard actually at least three different categories, right? Actual agriculture for sale versus farming for yourself, for your family, could be a completely different thing, versus pet, right? Home animals, like for example, I know here in Scottsdale they have a maximum of 3 dogs, and anything over 3 dogs, you now have to have a kennel license, whether they're pets or an actual kennel or whatever. Like there's certain kinds of licensing, so make sure not only with your state but with your city as well that you're checking to see exactly that. You don't want to break any laws for sure. So okay, very cool. All right. Okay, so a few little random personal questions, kind of jumping all over the place, as usual. What is the most dangerous thing that you've ever done?
I've done everything from jump 100 feet into water from the cliffs. I did 185 miles an hour on a motorcycle. Woo! And I used to ride dirt bikes and busted my back doing it. And also played around with... this was back in high school. I used to blow stuff up out in the desert and just all kinds of stupid stuff like that. But built a rabbit poop powered flamethrower. It wasn't exactly dangerous, but it was different.
And we will have to, by the way, because I think this was a clip. What was the TV show you were on?
Doomsday Preppers.
Yay! Awesome.
Nothing legitimizes your prepper organization like being on that show, let me tell you. And if you can't sense my sarcasm, that was sarcastic.
Well, but I I do have to say, because I saw the clip, I thought I saw the clip of you with the flamethrower. I mean, that alone was pretty darn cool.
Oh, it was fun, and I built it as a BTU value display of an alternative fuel, which is actually what got me into rabbits in the first place. I thought I discovered something called gasification, but it turns out I'm 200 years late to the party.
Oh.
The idea is that you can extract hydrocarbons from biomass by heating up a small amount of it with just the combustion of itself. So let's say you've got a tube with an hourglass in the middle, a little bit of fire right there. You light a little bit of your fuel stock on fire, and that heat causes pyrolysis, or a thermal breakdown of the matter above it. And then the carbon from the combustion goes down below and it's still hot. It's like 800 degrees. So let me back up a little bit. There's 4 things that happen when you light a match. There's dehydration, there's pyrolysis, there's combustion, and there's reduction. So in that tube, you have all 4 of those things going on. The dehydration, you know what that is. Pyrolysis, thermal breakdown of matter. Combustion, everything lights on fire. And the products of combustion are water and CO2. Well, when you put water as a gas through hot carbon, it pulls the oxygen molecules off of it. So water, H2O, becomes H2 and carbon monoxide, both of which are flammable. So you're producing fuel from just the combustion through the reduction area, and then all of the volatile hydrocarbons that are coming out of your biomass are also going through the reduction area and becoming a more suitable fuel. So basically, gasification is making a fuel-rich smoke from a fire. Is basically what it is. This has been used through both of the world wars. They would put a gasifier on the front end of their tractors and run it off of that. A lot of the German cars were rear-wheel drive because they could just tow a gasifier behind it, and even it would have kept going, except that the tax code changed to tax them by the weight of the vehicle instead of through the fuel. And so they no longer had their cheap fuel because their taxes made up for it. So
it all comes down to the tax man every time.
So I was looking for a way to pelletize biomass. I was thinking grass clippings and wood chips and stuff like that. I just needed to figure out a way to pelletize it. And I thought, since I'm trying to make electricity, it'd be stupid to have a pelletizer that ran on electricity. I was like, all right, what in nature pelletizes? And the answer was elk, probably a little big for my backyard, deer, also large, goats, way too loud, rabbits. Rabbits, that was the final answer. So I bought 5 rabbits, all female. Find out years later, well, now that I'm in the rabbit business, that there is a fairy that shows up, and his name is the Sex Change Fairy. So the Sex Change Fairy showed up and made one of my female rabbits not a female. And so 4 of them were pregnant and dropped a bunch of babies. And in about 8 months, I went from having 5 rabbits to 50. And I was selling a lot of their babies, and I'm like, oh, this isn't too bad. My backyard looked like the Clampetts had gotten into raising rabbits. I mean, there was just crap cages everywhere, and just like banjos would play as you walked out into the backyard. It was bad. And so I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to build cages to make better cages for these rabbits, because they're falling apart, and it was just stupid. And I bought every $20 cage off Craigslist I could find. So learned how to build cages, and I built awesome ones that would fit into the shed just right and pull out on drawers and stuff. And people would come by and want to buy a rabbit, and they'd be like, "Can you build cages like this for me?" Well, yeah, I don't know, $100 a piece. Sure, all right. So I end up giving people rabbits when I build them their cage. So the rabbit's so cheap to raise that I can give it away, because at birth it's cost me 50 cents in feed, and at weaning age, from birth to weaning age, it's 50 cents. Once it starts eating, it's consuming 7 cents a day. So that's if you're using commercial pellets. Anyway, so that was kind of the business model I went with was you buy a cage, I give you a rabbit. Well, everybody else is trying to jack up the price of their rabbits, and I'm supplying cages, so I just did that. But and it worked out pretty good. I had all the rabbits I needed, and they got cages, and then as I stepped up, I went from 50 to 250 in my backyard, and was raising about 1,250 pounds of rabbits a month in my backyard. I needed to expand, so I went to my former in-laws' place and built a $20,000 shed, and put a bunch of rabbits in there, and ended up making 700 babies a month, 3,500 pounds of rabbit a month. And I was feeding, I was selling the rabbits for food for pets, animal food. So it was a steady market until it wasn't. So it happens. I've learned so much. My education is a lot cheaper than that of a traditional college, but I have spent a lot of money educating myself. That's for sure.
So, okay, and this we hear out of entrepreneurs all day, right? I learned this lesson, and I'll never do that piece of whatever again. So, do you have like top three? Like, what are the most important things you've learned out of starting and running and now modifying the Hostile Hair to be a totally different business, including lots of things?
First and foremost, don't build on property you don't own. That's one. Advertising. Know your target audience and spend your time focusing on them. Right now, I'm using a lot of my time on Facebook, just communicating with my people, and from that, I get a few sales a month from that. But don't be afraid to spend some money in advertising. Would be some advice that I still haven't completely taken.
But on the right advertising is what I heard.
On the right advertising,
right? Make sure it's to the right targets.
Yeah, if you're selling guitars, I wouldn't put an ad in, I don't know, some old man magazine, because they're probably not going to be the ones that want to buy a guitar. Now there's going to be an older gentleman call me and say, "Hey, listen, I like guitars."
I was going to say, unless Dick Dale was reading the magazine, and then we're in trouble. But there we go. So, dig it. Okay. Cool. Very cool. Okay, so now I have to jump back a little bit here, talk about ADD just a little bit. How do rabbits? Were you joking? Do rabbits actually change sex? Does that happen? Okay, I'm sitting here going, how did that happen?
They're not like the frogs that can switch from boy to girl.
Yeah.
Back. So they're hard to tell, boy or girl, at birth, the day that they're born. You can tell. You can see the little nubs in their different positions, and it's easy enough to know which is a boy, which is a girl. And then they grow fur, and you can't see it as well anymore. And as the parts are developing, they look so much alike. And then, at 2 months old, it's pretty easy to tell. One's an innie, one's an outie kind of a thing. One's kind of more of a slit. One's popping up like a cylinder. But you can get things wrong, and I was new. I didn't know. The best story though about somebody new to rabbits is I sold a woman 2 male rabbits, and she takes them home, and 3 months later she calls me up and says, "Well, these rabbits have cancer." Like, what are you talking about? Both of them, they have cancer. It's like anal cancer or something. I'm like, did a vet tell you that this is can't? No, you can see tumors. Ma'am, where are those tumors located? Well, right by the anal cavity. Okay, do they look kind of like wadded up old bubble gum? Yeah, ma'am, those are testicles.
Oh.
And it's just silence on the phone for a minute. She's like, "Oh, I did get boys, didn't I?"
Well, you know what? Everybody, as you said, everybody has to learn a lesson when starting a new entrepreneurial business, and here we go, and that is one of them. I love it.
So yeah, it was awkward, but it was fun.
Okay, so
really hard not to laugh.
Well, yeah. Okay, and whoever that lady was, no name shall be named. So you are nameless. You are good. Okay. So we've kind of gone on. And we appreciate you for letting us tell the story and explaining to everybody else. I love it. Okay, so we've talked about gardening, which in my mind, fruits and vegetables and trees and trellises, but it takes more patience and it takes more time, because of course they breed a little bit slower than bunny rabbits do. You said, the first thing, if you wanted to move and switch into more of a livestock thing, the first thing that you would go to is rabbits. What I heard was because of the speed, because fairly easy. I mean, you said you had X numbers of hundreds of rabbits and it took you 20 or 30 minutes a night. I mean, that sounds, once you have the system, it sounds pretty easy. If somebody wants to progress from there, what would be your next recommendation?
Well, I've talked about aquaponics and rabbits, and I wrote a piece on this called hair-oponics. Basically, the idea is you have rabbits, and rabbits poop. It's almost like they poop more than they eat, but you have to clean out their cages. Well, if you take black soldier fly larva, so black soldier fly looks like a wasp, but it doesn't have a stinger, and it doesn't even have a mouth. As an adult, its whole purpose is to breed and lay eggs, and that's it. That's all it does as an adult. So it lays its eggs above food. So when the eggs hatch, the little larva drops down into the food, which is the manure or anything like that. And these larvae have mouths on them, and they actually eat the freshest food they can. So they're going to eat the manure, they're going to eat the rinds of the watermelon, they're going to eat all of this stuff. They're awesome composters because they're so ravenous. And they will even eat the cocoons and the eggs of other houseflies. So you will reduce your bad fly population with the good flies. So in 2 weeks, it takes them to go through food and become a darker color, because it's a maggot. It's a larva. It's a maggot, and they're about that big. And they start turning dark brown and then black. And when that happens, they need to become a cocoon. They want to become a fly. So they try to get out of the composter. They go to dirt, is what they'll say in the industry. Basically, they'll go down, they'll hit the composter plastic and say, oh, crap, can't go that way. And they start climbing up the easiest path, and then they fall down into a harvester where I catch them. And now I've got this little 40 to 60% protein pill that I just pop right into my mouth. Just kidding, no.
Totally had me going. I was like, no! Now, I can't say that I haven't eaten bugs. I've eaten bugs in other parts of the world, but not, no. Okay, no. Back up a step. Breathe. Okay, I'm sorry. 40 to 60% protein pill that you do what with?
You take those and you feed them to quail. So quail are these awesome little birds that are 40% more efficient than chickens. It takes 5 quail eggs to replace 1 chicken egg, but they're much more yolky, and it only takes 4 quail to replace a chicken in laying power, if you will, a volume of egg mass. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So a chicken does like 260 some odd eggs a year. Okay. So it's like they don't work weekends, basically. Or yeah. And then quail, they'll lay 300 eggs a year. So they're doing 40 more eggs per bird than the chicken. But it takes 5 quail eggs to replace 1 chicken egg.
Okay.
Anyway, so let's see. Oh, they very quickly can breed. I think it's like 6 to 8 weeks. They're breeding, and they start laying again. So they're very prolific bird. It takes about 4 to 10 seconds to butcher a quail. It's like scissors, rip, chest out, necks. You're done. It's very quick. Unless you're saving the legs, then you need to. If you're saving the legs and you want the skin on it, then you need to tumble it and everything. But
what do you do with the legs? I'm picturing. And for any of you that are out there that are not from Arizona, quail are definitely Arizona. I don't know. I would assume they're kind of southwest. I don't know if they're in the rest of the country or not. But quail are these little tiny birds. They're like the size of a big orange, basically, right? Little tiny birds. What would you do with a quail leg?
Well, first off, we're talking about the Corturnix quail, which is the Japanese little quail, and they actually will have a 4-ounce breast. So it doesn't sound like much, but 4 ounces times 4 is a pound. So 4 birds makes you a pound of meat.
And
So
humans are only supposed to eat 5 to 6 ounces of protein, right? I think that's the. I think.
I don't know. I'm a little bit bigger, so
We like our protein. If I
Yeah.
remember the food pyramid thing, and I know that thing's been changing and moving and whatever, you're supposed to have 5 to 6 ounces of protein a day, whether it comes from meat or vegetables or whatever. But anyway, okay, I'm sorry, side tangent. Go ahead, keep talking.
I will say though, the food pyramid thing, you look down at the source of that and who it's made by.
Yeah.
It's the same people that supply insulin. So they're telling you to eat all of these carbs and grains and stuff down here. Like, oh, that's healthy, huh? Great. What do you sell again? Oh, insulin. Let me see. What would happen if I ate all these carbs? I would need more insulin. Interesting. Anyway, I'm going to leave that alone.
Side tangent.
Yeah. I will jump on a soapbox of conspiracy theories so fast.
Okay, back to quail. Back to Japanese quail. Go back to quail.
So quail are kind of wasteful when they eat. They're just like smashing and ripping stuff apart, and a lot of what they eat falls through the cage, which is it's a waste. So you don't want that. So what do? You put a fish tank underneath of the quail cage. And so what the quail spill, the fish eat. And they'll even eat some of the manure that the quail drop, because I know that sounds kind of gross, but the reality is there are fish and there are animals out there that eat manure and actually get what they need out of it. So the fish will eat the spent quail, either parts of the larva that they've eaten or the grains you give them. Because I can sprout wheat, barley, and sunflower seeds. Any of that stuff is sprouted. I'll give it to the quail. They love it. Anyway, the fish and the quail manure are now in the water and need to be filtered out. So you run it through the rest of the aquaponics system, and you start growing your fruits and your vegetables. Which, how much of the tomato plant do you eat? Just the tomatoes, right?
Tomato, yeah.
Well, what happens to the rest of that plant?
If you're not composting all the material.
Well, and the rabbits, they're not supposed to have tomato plants because it's one of the nightshades, but they're not going to die from it either. You can give them some of that, and they'll compost it for you, and then feed it to the black soldier flies. So all of that stuff, and all your garden waste, all of that can go back to the black soldier flies, or some of it to the rabbits, and even to the quail. And anytime that you're not losing anything out of the system until you're eating it. So that's aeroponics.
And there we go. So it's a full, basically plants we've sprouted some of the plants, we've fed the rabbits, we've fed the quail extras are feeding the fish, and we're filtering. So effectively you have an entire ecosystem in one little space, and to jump backwards, effectively you said you've got it in maybe 2,500 square feet of a backyard, basically.
I think I'm 35 by 45 back there is my measurements.
Okay.
I don't know.
Or is there actually space? Because you've got a family with kids. Is there space for living back there too, or?
There's the patio, and I'm not done yet. Right now, it looks like redneck hell, really, because I'm revamping and putting in I'm putting in a couple of spigots so that I can get water in multiple places, because I'll have 3 different aquaponic systems when I'm done. And the aquaponic, my pond is it takes up 6 feet off the wall and then 13 feet off the wall the other way, and it's just in the corner of the yard, unused space. And then the rest of it's just kind of scrawling along the wall. And so everything's built around the edges, so there is space in the middle. But once I plant some trees, because you have to backwash the pond every now and then, like once a week or whatever, and I want the swells to grab the water as it goes, and so each one fills up and then it goes down to the next. So there'll be probably 7 trees back there when I'm done. So I've got a couple of apple trees, a couple of orange trees. I don't know if I'm going to do a plum yet, but I kind of want to. I love plums. So there's a few of them that love Arizona. They do just fine.
Dig it.
So.
Dig it. Well, this has been just fascinating, and I want to make sure that all of our listeners out there know how to find you, know how to get in contact with you, because basically what I'm hearing is, listen, you can go out, you can watch YouTube, there's so much free information out there. You can go and visit, like we heard you talk about going and visiting some of the other, people just even here in the Valley in Arizona. I'm sure they're all over the country that are experts that do this every day. This is how they feed their family. So you can always go and visit, or you can hire an expert, right? So we love our experts, and we want to thank you so much for being here today and giving us this knowledge. What is the last thing, besides getting all your information, what is the last piece of advice, the one thing you want people to know out there about what you do?
I help people become independent. The less we need the center, the less we need the state, the less we need whatever, the more we can help other people. The more you can, save your friends and people that come down on hard times. If you yourself aren't set up to help them, you can't. And I want to help people help others, basically. Spread of independence, then we have interdependence, and those two together are really what we need to focus on.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Nick. This has been fantastic. I love jumping all over the place, and I know for our listeners out there, this was not exactly our normal format, but I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So, Nick, how can our listeners out there find you?
Well, I'm at hostilehair.com, kind of like Angry Rabbit. I'm also on Facebook. It's facebook.com/hostile.hair. You just search Hostile Hair on there, you'll find me. Twitter. And then my office number is 480-331-3761. So I am reachable.
Easily findable.
Oh, and then you can Google me too. If you Google Nick Klein rabbits, at one point there were 5 pages just full of me.
Woo! So we get our never-ending hello. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this podcast. We love you. Right? It's awesome. Okay, now I want to know, where can I buy some swag? Because Hostile Hair, and you got to show the logo, because this logo is one of my favorite logos that I think I've ever seen. So where do I buy swag?
Hostilehair.com. One of the first options on there is the shop, and you can go in there, and I've got a couple of them. There's, it's rabbits holding guns. It doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah.
The whole idea was an alternate universe where instead of prohibition being about alcohol, it was about homegrown food. So these rabbits are bootleggers and moonshiners of a different breed. And so they're still fighting their own revenuers, and it's very juvenile, but it's fun.
Sounds awesome. I'm waiting for the comic strip to come out. So whenever that comes out, you let us know. We will post it. We will share it. All right. Well, so thank you very much for being here, Fireside Chat listeners. And if you enjoyed today's chat as much as I did, make sure that you show Nick and Hostile Hair your appreciation. Go love him and like him on YouTube and Facebook and Google, and go buy swag from his shop, because Nick is awesome. And, thanks so much again, listeners, for being here. This podcast will go live on Tax Goddess Live here in a few days. And then, of course, our next one, we will be back on August 27th, 2018. But, of course, if you have any questions or any topics or anything else, we're going to be seeing a little bit more of Nick, hopefully on our Facebook and our YouTube channel. So definitely check him out there as well. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can reach Nick on his Twitter at Hostile Hair, or Tax Goddess at Tax Goddess, at Hostile Hair. And, of course, you can reach out to our producers, Tax Goddess Live at Tax Goddess. So thanks so much for joining us, Nick. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.